Welcome to Saturday versus Sunday. I'm Jeff Dover. With me is John Barban. Let's talk football.
All right. That's the final week of the college regular season.
Week 14.
Week 14. It's kind of growing, I guess, maybe with extra buys and things. But yeah. All right.
Feels like it. Crazy weekend.
Crazy weekend.
It was fantastic.
Yeah. How'd you find making your list this time around?
Really good. It was, things came easy. It was great watching the games. It's just rivalry weeks. It's just nothing better.
Yeah. It really produced this week. Yeah. All right, so we're going to start with best ever, worst ever, then some flowers. I don't really have any coal. It's all mixed into the worst. All right, you ready to get going?
Yeah, let's do it.
Shall I start?
Please.
All right. The best thing I saw, number 3, was the UGA Georgia Tech game. I don't know how this isn't one of your best evers. You don't need to like either of these teams to appreciate how crazy of a game this was.
No, it's a fantastic game. We had the under, which looked really good. In the whole first half, felt super comfortable with that. And then Georgia tied it up late, couple of late turnovers by Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
But Georgia, that's what you're supposed to do. If you have a late turnover, you're supposed to score with that, which they did. And then we get 8 overtimes. So it was fantastic. And hats off to them. I don't feel like they played super well, Georgia, but it was great to watch.
This has been the story of Georgia, half a game.
You're right. Yeah,
can they ever put in a bad half of it? I mean, the first half, they couldn't do anything. They couldn't stop the run. They couldn't move the ball at all on offense. I mean, this has been the story of Georgia all year. Just half a team. A few weeks ago, remember we were trying to figure out what is a Georgia game? Was it half a game?
Yeah, exactly.
And they have just enough talent. They have enough talent to overcome playing just awful first halves. It's always first half. I guess that's a good thing. It's always the second half where they turn it on.
Well, and what's nuts about this one too is that you're right. They don't play a complete game, but it's also how they play that poorly. Like Georgia Tech was running the ball 5 yards like every time and just walking it down the field. And that is something you never see a Georgia defense give up, right?
No. So what was it, 260 or 70 yards again?
It was crazy.
Or something?
And it was how he was doing it. Like the commentators said it, like they're not making an adjustment for the QB zone read thing. Like Haynes King would, if it was the pitch was there, he would do it. Otherwise, he just run it up for 5 yards, and that worked every time. And it's crazy.
Maybe the coaches just think we have better guys, and they'll eventually figure it out. If it wasn't for that stellar hit by the linebacker who popped the ball loose, they were going to lose this game.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And it was and Haynes King fumbling it there with like 2 minutes to go, like that would have sealed it, But it was
that's the one, isn't that the one where he pops it loose? And it's just he was getting the first down there too, and everything. Yep. And that hit was, turnovers are always kind of a luck thing, but man, just that was a perfect hit, and it was a timely hit. But you can't bank on generating a turnover to win a game. That is still kind of luck. I mean, how many times has King hit all game long and he never dropped the ball?
No, and they were up. Georgia Tech was up by 7 with the ball and like 2 minutes to go.
Yeah,
so like that should be over.
The only way they lose is a fumble right there.
Yes.
So, I mean, man, but UGA, okay, so this is a bit of we're going to talk about UGA for the whole season here, and Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech started the season with one of the best games. Remember the very first game of the season, I said, I bet you that's a top 10 game. I still think it is.
Absolutely.
That opening win. Yep. And then they finished the season with another top 10 game.
Yeah,
so Georgia Tech, and then they got one of the biggest upsets of the year against Miami. So Georgia Tech has been a sneaky fun team to watch all year.
Yeah. Georgia Tech and Boston College were my sneaky fun teams this year. Yeah. Like I really watched, anytime I've watched, I haven't seen many Georgia Tech games, but when I have, I've really enjoyed them. Yeah. Same with Boston College. So that was, that was great. It was great to see. And that was, I just don't think Georgia's that good. Like, and
apparently not.
No. So I don't get it. But,
and then for Georgia, they opened the season with a half a game against Clemson. Now they dominated them in the second half, but in what did the first half was a 3-point game, 10 point, something like that. It was close. And they just kept doing that all year. Half a game against Texas, half a game against Alabama. Just every big game was half a game. It's just they're good enough to win most of those games, putting in terrible first half, but always the first half, and then they bounce back. And then sometimes they couldn't, like Ole Miss. They just couldn't survive. But that was, UGA has been a bad first half, good second half team all year. And they did it again here at the very end. And that overtime was, I almost think, I don't like the 2-point overtime thing. I wish they just stuck with the 25-yard thing.
Yeah, I get it, because when you just go with the full possessions, like there was that Texas A&M LSU one was crazy long,
Yeah.
And so I don't mind the idea of like trying to doing something to shorten it, but the 2-point conversion is such a unique. It's kind of similar to hockey with the shootout, like it's not really a hockey game like the shootout. You know what I mean? Like, in the 2-point conversion is such a specific, like, seems like low percentage play. I don't know. I didn't like seeing them miss so many.
Yeah.
Like
well, and I don't think I compared to that LSU game, I don't think this was that much shorter, because in those overtimes, they're not driving it seems as though they're not driving the ball for a first down, then another first down, like an 8-play, 25-yard drive. They seem to score in a couple of plays every time in overtime.
Yeah.
It's quick. So this didn't seem to be much different than that. It just took forever. And it was getting tedious watching them constantly miss on the 2-point plays. I guess it was Jesse Palmer was on that game. Whoever it was saying they're out. They're out of all their good 2-point plays. They've used them all up.
Exactly. It's no one has 6 in the bag. Like for the,
And another thing that I noticed, I just never paid attention, I guess, because I haven't seen so many of these, haven't seen too many of these super long overtime games. They get a timeout for every one of those.
Yes.
I thought that was stupid. I mean, this game could go on for 5 hours. You keep giving them timeouts.
Yeah.
Like
that's crazy.
That just doesn't, it seems like way too much.
Yeah. No, Haynes King, 303 yards passing, 110 rushing. Like what a just colossal game by him, and former 5-star, recruit, and really found his home, into Georgia Tech. So yeah.
It just makes me want a full on triple option Georgia Tech team again.
Yeah.
It was so much fun watching them go. So anyways, good for Georgia. We're already in the SEC championship game. To your point, they needed this just in case if they lost this and the SEC championship game, that would have been 4 losses and they'd have been out. I actually, as this game was unfolding, I thought to myself, oh, Dover's right. They could actually miss the playoffs entirely, because they 100% looked like they were losing this game and we were winning our bet.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to make of them. I guess this is just an example of the flattening of the landscape. This is a highly flawed team that can be gotten.
Yeah.
And somebody in the playoffs could easily get them. But on the other hand, they're so good that they can actually win a half a game. So I don't know.
No, and it's my number 3 best thing I saw this weekend was also the Georgia Tech game. And the only thing that we haven't talked about that I had made a note of is Swift is really good, the running back for Georgia. He runs really
Swift.
They're what's his name? Hold on.
That's like 10 years ago.
It was
sorry. Well, he's in the NFL now.
Yeah. But he's like him. Nate Frazier.
Yeah,
that's
Frazier. Close. Very close.
So it is. It's just.
But you know what? Swift was good.
Swift was good. Frazier ran like him. That's what made me think of it.
Okay.
And there was a couple times where I feel like there was injuries are never good. Okay. I never go for injuries, but he hit people so hard running the ball, and they were injured, and 2 of them didn't come back. And so
that's crazy.
That takes a certain violent level of
and
running
Frazier's
the ball.
not the starter.
No, but it's because it was Etienne and he was out and stuff. So, but it's that guy was I've never seen a running back since Swift run with such violence and take people out on offense. And
I would say for Georgia, there's no such thing as running back 1, 2, and 3. They're all typically interchangeable. I guess one guy's designated the starter.
No,
but from what I've seen, it doesn't matter which of the running backs are in. They're all amazing. Yeah,
for sure. It's like Florida now too. Florida's got some really good, like 2 or 3 ones. So, but it's So I haven't seen that in a while, where the running backs like laying people out. So it was a great game, and it was.
I guess you could say Georgia's learning to. Well, they have tons of experience coming back. I mean, that's all they do all season long. I mean, that's a scary team for anyone to play in the playoffs, because if you get ahead of them, you can't be comfortable getting ahead of them if you just look at their tape and realize, oh, this is just what they do. They're going to come back in the second half, no matter how bad the first half is.
Yeah. No, for sure. They're as if you're playing for Georgia and you go down early, I don't think you freak out by that. I think that's that's in
It's a
your
team
comfort
that knows
place.
how to win. This is kind of eerily like the Chiefs right now. It doesn't matter how
Mm.
the game goes when the final 2 minutes arrives. They get their way back in there. So that's like a big time championship type team that can play a clunker all game long and bring it all the way back to being competitive at the very end.
Yeah, you're right in terms of the style of play. The main difference is Beck is no Mahomes, even a little
No,
bit.
oh yeah, no. I
But
just mean,
other than
yeah,
that,
yeah.
yeah,
I just
you're right.
mean, as you watch the game by halftime, you're thinking, what is with this team? And then at
Yeah,
the end of the game, they're like, oh, okay, here they are.
yeah.
So,
All
oh well.
right.
All right. The second best thing I saw was the Texas Longhorns defense
Ooh,
blanking Texas A&M, and it never looked like A&M's ever going to score on them. They
yeah.
just weren't. And that defense showed up big time, kind of a statement thing. This is going to be an awesome rematch. I highly doubt it's going to look like the last Texas UGA game. They just never do. You just aren't going to get that same thing. Maybe Georgia can put a full game in this time. They're probably going to have to, and Texas is also going to have to show up. I hope it's not as sloppy and as ugly as that last game. But yeah, Texas completely dominated them, and they needed to because they didn't score a lot in this game.
No, and it was Texas. It's a great call about Texas defense because they actually shut out Texas A&M because the only offense they scored was on that kick or the interception,
whatever it was. It was defensive touchdown. It wasn't
right. So that was and at Texas A&M was a really big deal. It really looked like at the beginning that Texas A&M was somewhat establishing the run, and I felt like they were, but it was just a couple of bad breaks and turnovers that really they're just not built to overcome that. So yeah, no, Texas was really, there was this, if you had the under in this game, you felt extremely comfortable from the opening tip to,
I mean, on top of that, Ewers looked good. And
yep.
his deep ball accuracy and his touch, like
as if they bring in Manning for like the running quarterback part. That's crazy. So
I guess he's technically a better runner than Ewers. Ewers got a few yards with his legs when he needed to.
But Manning is actually a better runner than Ewers, and especially with Ewers with the ankle sprain. But it was it's just funny to see like that's the guy you're bringing in a Manning to be for the running option. I guess that's more of
the name doesn't ring true with a running quarterback.
Yeah,
but yeah, so this looks like. I mean, there are some criticisms that Texas has strength of schedule hasn't been that good, but this was a legitimate win, especially shutting them out. But A&M's offense isn't much to shout about. So I guess Texas is coming into this game looking pretty strong, and UGA is coming into this game just being what it's always been.
Mm-hmm.
Is coming back after having an awful first half. So I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be a good game, I think.
Yeah, my number 2 best thing. I just had rivalry games in general. Like this was before the weekend started. I had a call with Dave yesterday. Shout out Dave about and his first thought was like, there's not too many good matchups in terms of the games because there's not too many highly ranked teams playing together.
Yeah.
Which is true. Like at first glance, like I could see how the average fan would think that. But there was just because they were unranked on ranked matchups, there was some really good games, really important games in terms of determining who would be in the conference championships or playoff outlooks and stuff. And so it's just really great to have a really important like South Carolina Clemson game, the Texas A&M game, the Ole Miss Mississippi State game was really important. The Georgia Tech game was really important. So like all these, the Tennessee Vandy game was really important. So like all these rivalry games are, not only are they rivalry, but they really mean a lot, and it's they were just super entertaining. Just in general.
Yeah. No, you're right. It was a good week for the rivalry games producing. Mm-hmm. And to your point, I guess maybe you could say it's the 12-team playoff that made some of these games even more important, because some teams' ability to get into a position to be invited. I'm trying to say this the right way. This is an invitational.
Exactly. It's
but I guess
earn their way to the playoffs.
Earn their way to get. Yeah.
It's not.
Look good enough to be chosen in the top 12.
Exactly.
It's fun that this week mattered for a lot of teams, and it wasn't predetermined. Some of these teams needed to get into their championship game for that, and some of them needed to just show up for the potential shot at an at-large bid. So yeah, these games matter. And another thing, like I'm thinking of the Mississippi State Ole Miss game, which we covered.
Mm-hmm.
That on paper, you're thinking that's going to be a blowout, but Mississippi State gave them all that they could handle.
Oh, yeah.
And that's just how rivalry games seem to go.
That's a great point. That was, we had, what did we have? We had the plus 26 or whatever in that one. And it was, and that one from the opening tip, I was like, oh yeah, we're on the right side. Because Mississippi State was playing with its hair on fire on offense and defense. And, they didn't.
At Ole Miss.
Yeah, and they didn't win, but that's exactly what you expect in a quality rivalry game, or Michigan at Ohio State.
We'll
like
get
it was
to that.
And it was just they on paper it looks like a real mismatch, but there are the old adage is true. So on some of them, you throw the records out when it's that type of rivalry game, and anything can happen. And it's the Michigan win was awesome, and it was
we'll get to that later.
Yeah, all right.
So, okay. So my number one best thing I saw was the Big 12's been my conference all year.
Oh yeah.
So it's Iowa State and Arizona State taking care of business and getting into the championship game. Now, obviously, Iowa State needed the BYU win. I guess that's how that worked for them to get in, which all happened.
What? They kept showing that graphic of like what needs to happen for what team to get in, and I couldn't follow it because there's too many.
As the day was evolving, it arrived because on a timeline, BYU used the last game that was going to affect this, and it turned into if BYU won, Iowa State went in. If BYU lost, Colorado was in, I think is how it ended up. So obviously Iowa State ended up going in, but Arizona State might look like the team playing the best with the most momentum going into the Big 12 championship game, which no one would have picked at the beginning of the year.
Next to Colorado, I'd agree with you. But Colorado's not in the championship
both
game.
Of them,
in terms of who's playing well now.
Both of them peaking at the end. Now, Colorado had a dud last week. Arizona State is just rolling right now. Scadaboo's awesome. I think his game will translate to the pros. We'll find out. But someone's going to take a chance on him.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And Iowa State, for me, has been the most fun team to watch all year. That game...
Good unis. The All Blacks they had in the...
Now, I guess in that game, it's a little bit of best of, a little bit of worst of. Iowa State took care of business, but Kansas State, man, they were shooting themselves in the foot all game long.
Oh, man. That team, when they had it together earlier in the season, I was all aboard the Kansas State train, and the wheels really fell off the wagon. And so that's not the same team that they were before. I don't understand why.
Like when Avery Johnson gets loose, he looks like he's impossible to stop.
Yes.
And when Iowa State had a game plan to keep him in control, but man, if he gets the edge, it's just no one can get their hands on him. This guy's got like world-class sprinter speed, but they had a really good game plan. That defense, I guess they have one of the best secondary one of the best passing defenses in the Big 12. Whatever it was, they figured out a way to keep Kansas State in front of them and keep that whole game in control. The opening play, Kansas State turns the ball over on a option pitch, and that kind of set the stage for Kansas State just getting in its own way and never being able to get out of its own way. But then Iowa State games go like this. They have crazy turnovers, blocked field goals, points on points that aren't scored on offense. It's all season long. Their games have looked like this, and all season long at the end, if you've been watching them, you'll learn that you can trust that they're going to be in the game at the end, no matter how the game's going. It just got to that point where, they're going to be within 2 or 3 minutes to go. Somehow Iowa State's going to be, they're still going to have a chance to win. It's not, there's none of their games looked all that inevitable. Maybe one that wasn't like that. But other than that, this was just, to me, one of the most fun teams to watch. And then over time, Arizona State became one of my other wagons. As you can see, they earned the shirt for 2 weeks in a row here. This is just one of the best stories in college. And then this conference, for me, has been the most entertaining. BYU's been fun as hell. Colorado's been fun. Both of these teams have been fun. Kansas was my preseason dark horse.
Then what happened to them?
Oh my God, Baylor. Baylor, I haven't paid enough attention to Baylor. They are hot and cold, but man, when they're hot, it's an avalanche. So anyway, Big 12 has been one of my best, if not best thing to watch all year. And then good for Iowa State and Arizona State. I guess the Cyclones were up there too, for getting into the championship games. Is going to be that That's going to be a fun one, but a tough one to watch because I kind of want them both to win.
I know. It was the only thing that would have made the best thing ever, the Big 12 for me, was if Colorado made the Big 12 championship game. Both of us, I think, would have liked to have seen them in that.
Yeah, just for the circus of prime. Yeah.
Yeah. They had a really good graphic at the Colorado game where they were talking about what's happened since Coach Prime has been there. And it's like the number of applications like has gone up like 500% or something. Like it makes a big deal to the university, like in all levels, you know, like, and so it's that's crazy. So
I was watching Shannon Sharp and Ocho Cinco's podcast Nightcap, and a bunch of big commits all used their show to announce.
Oh, no way.
So
really?
like a major lineman, an O tackle, like a 5-star offensive tackle, big time edge rusher, and a quarterback. All these guys did their public announcement of committing to them on their show a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, just a few nights ago. No. So I mean, obviously, Dion has access to all of these guys, or these guys, you know, they talk preferentially about Colorado on that podcast versus all the other. I mean, they talk all different football, but you can tell they know him personally. They have a personal relationship with him. All of many ex-pros or former pros know him. They're on the sidelines. They're involved. Like he was a major media presence when he worked in the media. So it's not like they regularly talk to Ryan Day or something. It's him specifically. And it was interesting. And that podcast is massive. They got a couple million subscribers. And so it kind of made sense to me. Oh yeah. Of all the places for them to announce, I bet you these kids are thrilled to be announcing with Shannon Sharp and Ocho Cinco on their pod. I mean, that's pretty cool.
It's really cool.
I wonder if that's going to be an exclusive thing with kids going to Colorado, or if other kids might be well, can we do that too? Yeah. I wonder if that'll become a thing on their show specifically.
Oh yeah. No, that's a big deal.
Hey, you guys can do it on our show too if you want.
That's right. Any recruit that wants to come on into Saturday versus Sunday, announce where you're going, you know, absolutely. It's the
same with NFL free agent signings. You guys can announce here too if you want.
I was like that with the I thought, what were you going to say? Is Ocho Cinco? They got a couple million subscribers. Like throw a few thousand our way. You know,
why not?
Take them. We take subscribers. Okay, so the number one thing that I saw this weekend was the Miami, Syracuse, Michigan, Ohio State, Kyle McCord connection.
Oh, I was going to do this. I'm so glad you did this.
Yeah. So this was the, you know, Miami heavily favored over Syracuse going in the weekend. Ohio State heavily favored over Michigan going into the weekend. And all Kyle McCord did was throw for 380 yards and 3 touchdowns for Syracuse to upset Miami, take them out of the ACC championship game. It's a huge win for them. And all Michigan did was beat Ohio State 13-10 in a not, I wouldn't say unwatchable game, but like it was an absolute rock fight. And also like not executed well
offensively
all the time.
Unwatchable.
Offensively,
you want to say it that way.
Yeah, for sure. And it was and Will Howard threw for 175 yards and a TD and 2 interceptions, right? So do you think
how much would they want McCord back now? Vindication for Kyle McCord. You've been on this game
more than any other time this season. It was like immediately apparent that arm talent was missing. So hats off to McCord. It's, you know, he's played great. He's had a great season at Syracuse. Like Syracuse going to go to a nice bowl game now, you know, like that's.
I hope that there's a way maybe next season it unfolds if he's still around that they play Ohio State in some bowl game.
That'd be great.
But yeah, I thought about that the whole time watching that upset over Miami. I thought, man, could Ohio State ever use this guy right now? I don't get what is it that
Kyle McCord's a senior now, so I think he might be.
Yeah,
done.
But these guys play 7 years. They all find another way.
That's true.
That COVID thing's going to last forever. All of these extra years they get. But what I don't get, I mean, obviously, I don't understand why or what it is they saw in Howard over this guy that they didn't have the patience to keep this guy around another year, and he's this good. Especially, the talk is Ohio State has the best receiver room the game has ever seen, and then you have this quarterback. And somehow that didn't work, but then Will Howard can't make it work at all. Like that, it's pretty clear that was a step backwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And on paper, it looked amazing because Will Howard was the good option, like run pass option guy at Kansas State, right?
But why would you go with a run pass option guy when you have like four
hold on,
amazing
you got
wide
the run
receivers?
pass option guy, and then you go get the offensive coordinator, the
Chip Kelly,
who's like specializes in that.
And then they'd never run it.
I know. So like on paper, it looked like it was all lining up to be perfect. So, but it's
well. Let's get to that. We'll talk more about Ohio State later. Let's just stick on
anyway,
how
that was
much
the best
better.
thing. It was great to see. I've had so when I first was in Florida for 9 years, and then I've been in Montreal for 16 now. In my first year at Montreal, we had season tickets to Syracuse.
Yeah.
So I've actually been to a number of Syracuse games. So and it's great to see that dome can get super loud when they're really into it. And they've got some good players. Like their running back, which I think is a true freshman, was amazing. The LaKent Allen,
kind of a tall guy too.
Yeah, he's a big dude. It was 6 feet 201 pounds, and it was wait, no, he's a junior, I guess. Okay, and then who was the wide receiver who looked really good?
The
Meeks, he was a senior. He looked amazing too. But anyway, it was they're a good team, and it was hats off to them.
And I also found Miami's tackling was kind of sloppy in that game.
Yeah,
like towards once the comeback started. Also, they were down. Miami went up 21-0, and then just they almost.
That's a pretty good choke job by Miami as opposed
it's a huge. Middle management Mario can't do it. Do it. They looked almost casual. Like Cam Ward plays with a degree of
he does
looseness. I don't want to say casual. He looks really loose, really confident.
Casual sometimes
because he's so confident. And he's so mobile and just knows that no one's getting their hand on me. I can extend this play as much as I feel like it. But sometimes it almost looks like, is he engaged or is he just kind of goofing around? I know he's not, but it almost can look that way. I guess that's good. He doesn't look tight, that's for sure. But man, the defense, just arm tackling, just kind of poor effort, just popping but not wrapping. There was some kind of ugly looking plays that, I don't know, for part of the second half there. They just look like, somehow this guy will go down. It's not my job. It's like, well, it is. If you got your hands on him, it's your job to bring him down. You can't expect anyone else on your team to. They're expecting you to. I don't know, something about it. It just didn't have the same. For stretches of the game, their defense didn't have the same intensity as some of the other games that I was watching. So I don't know. It just looked a bit sloppy for Miami. Obviously, something went wrong because Syracuse just went off afterwards. Anyways, all right. So moving on to worst ever.
Yep.
Okay, number 3 worst thing I saw was USC giving up 200-yard pick sixes in the fourth quarter on back-to-back possessions, I think it was. And the reason this isn't a best ever for Notre Dame is because USC was in the middle of an epic comeback.
Yeah,
like their offense was marching, and then he throws a what I guess he thought was going to be a back shoulder thing right down on the 1 yard line. The Notre Dame.
It was back to back the possessions because it was 3 minutes 39 seconds 99-yard interception return. 1 minute 18 seconds. Xavier Watch 100-yard interception return.
So think about it. Both of them. One of them was in the end zone. The other one was on the 1 yard line. That means USC marched right down into the red zone in both cases. Yeah. USC's offense was rolling, and this was going to be a major upset here.
Yeah. Notre Dame 35-28 when after USC scored the last touchdown, so they're within 7 with like half the fourth quarter to go, and then marched it down for the tying score. And gave up the 99-yard interception.
And this has been USC's MO all year long. They're in the game, if not leading in the fourth quarter, and then blow it. Now, in this case, they weren't leading, but man, they were putting it. The offense was coming alive. Notre Dame looked like they had no answer for this offense.
Yeah,
and USC's defense was doing enough to keep them in this game. And instead of this being a classic finish, it was an all-time dud. I mean, I guess for Notre Dame fans, again, to me, that sort of stuff isn't necessarily better scheme, or that's kind of partly luck and partly just bad decision making by the quarterback, especially the second pick. There was no one near that guy. So, I mean, no receiver near the defender who picked it off. It was just right in his hands.
Yeah.
And it's got to be pretty bad for both of them to go 100 yards the other way. There was nobody anywhere to try to stop that. So, no offensive player could even get their hands on those guys on the way back. They had a convoy. So it was to me, this was more ugliness from USC than the Notre Dame defense rising to the occasion. Like, there's no plan. There's no plan. There's no defensive plan for 200-yard pick sixes.
No. And it was, I agree with everything you're saying. The only reason why I didn't make my list is because that gave us the Notre Dame like -7.5, which we needed. So
we needed that. I'll take.
So I was fine with that. But you're right. In terms of like, executing in a college football, like that was terrible.
Yep.
So, okay. Right. So my number 3 worst thing that I saw this weekend was the last touchdown scored by Penn State. So they were up 38-7. There's no like less than 20 seconds left. They still they had their backups in, I believe, because it was the pass was from Pribula, right? So I think it's the backup,
Pribula,
right? Yeah, Pribula, and it was and they scored with no time left, another touchdown to go 44-7, which is really not called for. So
Beauty
they could
have.
They could have, but I mean, it's 38-7. Like you don't like.
I understand.
You don't need 44-7 with zero time left. Like you could have. That was a need the ball situation.
Well, this is the pettiness of this stupid playoff and getting chosen because of things. We don't know why they choose people anymore, but part of it we know has something to do with how it looks. And if other teams they're competing with a playoff spot beat Maryland by 40 points, well, then they better beat them by 40 points. Same thing with Indiana beating Purdue 66-0.
Yeah.
Obviously, anyone can do this to Purdue because everyone's been doing it. Now, that was brutal, especially in the snow. Yeah. But it's pretty clear anyone could have done this to Indiana or to Purdue and Indiana. Everyone was doing this to Purdue. Maybe not quite this badly, but again, you could make the same argument that both Indiana and Penn State were running up the score for the sake of style points. And I guess that's the sentiment you're getting at with that.
No,
why do you do that?
Listen, I get the style points. I get the running up the score because I look at point differential, common opponents, like all that stuff's fine. This was 38-7 with less than 15 seconds. Like they scored
again, that's
with
style
0
points.
No, it's zero seconds. Like it's not. Once you get to that point, you just kneel it for that last possession.
I agree.
So,
act like you've been there. Act like you've been there. Small game James.
That's why Penn State's on the list and not the Indiana because of what you said. Like you got to blow out Purdue. Now I don't know when they last. Here I can check that now. I don't know when they last scored on them in terms of the.
Well, they were just running this. It was just happening all game long.
Yeah,
so.
But it was
there's some distaste to doing it with zero time on the clock.
Yeah. It was the other thing was that Penn State was a pass. Like they threw a touchdown pass as opposed like if you run the ball and they just don't tackle you and you run in, like then that's on you. So the last TD Indiana scored was a run, but I'm like,
I mean, I would maybe give it to them if that was the one that got Tyler Warren his record or something, but he got that way earlier in the game. So there was no, you're right. There's no need to do that. Even style points, no one's going to think 44 is better.
38-7, no, not
it's all the same.
See, when you throw the touchdown pass with that time,
it's a little bit tasteless. Yep. It's a little tacky. All right, so my number 2 worst thing, I already said it here, was Miami losing its shot at the ACC title game. That was just, we've already talked about it. That great for Syracuse, but Miami this team, maybe Cristobal's not it. I don't know, but I've labeled him middle management Mario because dropping that game to Georgia Tech maybe doesn't look quite as bad because Georgia Tech could have easily beaten Georgia. So that's a better team that's not an anomaly, I guess. This team can do that. Georgia Tech can do that to people. But blowing it here when everything mattered, this might knock them out of, I don't think they deserve a playoff bid after that.
Well, it's making it interesting now, right? Because there's more teams with 2 losses and 3 losses. And then this is where you're going to get into like, is a 9-3 Alabama or 9-3 South Carolina better than a 10-2 Miami, right? And it's going to be,
what happens if Clemson beats SMU and they both have more wins than Miami?
Yeah, no, it's going to be tough. I don't know. Like that's, if Clemson beats,
Miami has what?
Clemson beats SMU, that's the real disaster scenario.
Right, because Miami is 10-2 now, right?
Yes,
with no option for another data point.
Right, and Clemson is 9-3 right now.
They can go 10-3.
If Clemson wins, they'd go 10-3, but they won the game. That's why they're in.
Right, so they win the game.
SMU would be 11-2, right? And so so you could put Miami in ahead of them
which looks really tacky.
I'm right.
Because they never made their championship game. This is why this whole thing's so dumb.
Yeah, exactly. And then but you're going to be debating with like an 11-2 SMU, 10-2 Miami, and like a 9-3 South Carolina or something. Like that's where the beauty pageant part comes and the invitational comes in. So
yeah. So anyway, so that caused a bunch of chaos. Miami, they all were talking about how good this team was, and it looked really good starting off the season beating Florida, which turns out to actually that win aged well given how much better.
Yeah, Florida is Florida was the opposite of Kansas State, where Kansas State looked amazing in the beginning, and then the last few games, if they're not playing as well as they were, and Florida's really turned it around. It was the best single announcement by an athletic director ever, saying vote of confidence. They've really played well after that.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, that was my number 2 worst thing.
Okay, so my number 2 worst thing is the trying to decide who's going to be in the conference championship game, because it's different between conferences. I don't know if you know this. So we already talked about the Big 12 had a pretty convoluted thing in terms of who won and whatever in the tiebreakers or something. But did you know that Indiana and Penn State are both 8-1 in conference, and they're both 11-1? And how do you know why they picked Penn State over Indiana?
No, I'm probably going to not like it.
So it's the 4th tiebreaker, which
they had to go 4 in.
It's 4 in. It's the 4th tiebreaker and it's the cumulative record of opponent. So the Penn State's cumulative record of opponent was slightly better than Indiana's.
I guess that's kind of fair.
Okay, but then did you know that UNLV is 6-1 and Colorado State is 6-1 in the Mountain West? And do you know how they determine who goes in there?
All right, let me have it.
Who's higher ranked which is different. So Colorado State was.
Well, Penn State would have gone in on that too, right?
I don't.
Weren't they higher ranked?
Yes, for that one, but it's
which I don't like that because that is all just selection, anyways.
Yes,
right. So there's actually no reason Penn State should have constantly been higher ranked than Indiana all year, other than they were just chosen that way at the beginning, so they just sort of stuck around there all year.
Yeah. Now I'm fine with the UNLV one too, because they're 10-2 overall and Colorado State's 8-4, but still, like in the conference thing, I just think it's weird that they use different rules, to determine it. So that's just bizarre.
And I don't even know what the rest of the conferences do. I guess ACC wasn't too convoluted. It was SMU was pretty obvious. They clinched last week, right?
Yeah. So and the last thing just about this is that it'll be interesting to see. We've already sort of touched on it, but it's the
how does the Big 12 figure out tiebreakers?
Yeah, I don't know. We already talked about that. I was like, I've seen that a few times. Like I get that by 10 p.m. Eastern, it was just like if BYU wins.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean the Big 12. I meant how does the Pac-12 figure out tiebreakers?
Yeah, there's whoever's ahead of Oregon State. That's Washington State has more wins than Oregon State.
A couple of weeks ago, I saw that they actually have their conference records 1-0, 0-1.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So dumb.
That's great. So, and then the last thing just about this, about who goes in the conference championship, is that, will it benefit you not to go? Okay.
Yeah.
So let's say, Ohio State lost, right? So it's their second loss. If they were going to the Big Ten championship game and lost again, right, they'd be out pretty much, probably, like, for sure. But because they're not going and they're not going to play and they've only got 2 losses, like, they might be in now. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like,
and this doesn't change at all, because during the 4-team playoff, people who didn't make their championship game, like Alabama, who finished 11-1, still got chosen.
Yes.
So nothing has changed. It's just now we're debating on the at-large bids versus the higher up.
But it's nothing has changed, except it's going to affect more teams now, which to me makes it kind of worse. Like, because they're if there's 2 teams that make it in, that weren't in their conference championship games, and 2 teams that lost in the conference championship game that don't make it in, like that, like that, I feel like that's
the alternative. Worse, the alternative to this beauty pageant choosing them in, which all national rankings are, is just an invitational, is the NFL, where you have a division winner who could actually have a losing record, but because they won their division, they go in.
Yeah.
So that's the potential make you want to barf scenario on the other side, where, well, what doesn't matter if you won your division, you're in, and you could have people hate that in the NFL. They would rather just see the top teams.
The only thing that makes it okay for me for that, like, or not okay, but like slightly better, is that team's going to be on the road every single game, right? Whereas like if you won the division and had a good record, like, you host playoff games, like, which means something.
Yeah.
So that Like, but
I don't say that. I'm not saying either way is better. It's just there's something you're going to be distasteful. There's something distasteful about both. One of them is just the committee just decides based. We're going to make them ranked 11th, so they're in now.
Yeah.
So it's just a bunch of people deciding. The other way, if a couple divisions end up being weak for the year, and 500 record or even below gets you in, you're like, oh, well, that's just the way it worked out. We were hoping division winners were all competitive, but in some cases they're not. So in both cases, you could end up with something you're like, oh, that doesn't seem fair. That didn't work out the way we were hoping. So it's never going to be perfect when you have that many teams split up into conferences or divisions, especially in college when you've got so many teams. How do you? And they never play each other.
Yeah.
How do you ever really?
It's amazing how much they didn't play each other like in their same conference. Like Miami never played Clemson, right? Like there's a anyway. It's
I mean, this is another thing I don't like is all of the cupcake out of conference games.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be allowed to do that. It should be 9 conference games, and all your out of conference games have to be other big conferences. Because even those data points help. Like Michigan against Texas, like, okay, that's a real out of conference game. We'll go with that. USC at LSU, that's a real data point.
Yeah.
But when you have, when you're playing, when you're playing the cupcakes, or where you're playing an SEC team schedules Purdue. It's okay, yes, it's a Big Ten team, but that's not a useful data point. That's not even a useful data point in the Big Ten.
Right. Yeah.
So hopefully they'll get over this fear of losing a game and this need to pad their schedule and realize the landscape is flattening. And the best thing you can do is just schedule good teams across the board and cool it with this eight in conference games. Like everyone's got to get to 9, if not 10. I'd rather see 10. So anyways.
Okay. What's the worst thing you saw then?
Well, what's your second? Oh, okay. The worst thing I saw was Ohio State. Just everything about this game. Okay. And Ryan Day. We're gonna have to call him third base Ryan. I'm starting to lean towards this narrative that he was born on third base and just inherited a good team. Yeah.
Okay.
So I thought about it. I was listening to a few other takes. Cover 3 was really leaning into them blowing the game and not really giving Michigan their credit for winning this game.
Yeah, when you miss 2 field goals and you lose by 3 points, that's a pretty safe argument. But you could
also say Michigan put him in that position the whole game long.
Yeah.
And one of the narratives Fornelli brought up was Ohio State kept trying to prove they were tough and kept trying to run the ball, even though it was clear they just couldn't. But then again, other people were saying, yeah, Michigan's defense was just that good. They showed up to play. You couldn't run or pass on them. They just were the better unit. If you were going to pick one unit on the field that eventually won the game, was the Michigan defense. Ohio State's defense was awesome too.
Yeah.
But when you add up which team ran the ball more, it was Michigan. And if you shut Ohio State's running game down, which Ohio State has not ever shown that they can run the ball effectively throughout the season, it happens in moments, but you wouldn't label Ohio State a dominant running team this year by any means.
Yeah.
But then they couldn't pass effectively either. They just couldn't really get anything done. Michigan's defense has been good all year, but boy, this was an amazing performance. But specifically, at the end of the game, Ryan Day started to look like Matt Eberflus with his end of game management. So one of the arguments I heard was, now it should have never got to this point if you believe that to a man, Ohio State just had, more 5 and 4-star recruits. And this was, everyone kept saying, all these talking heads like, oh, this is the best roster we've ever seen. And I maintain it was a huge mistake getting rid of McCord. We've already discussed that. Howard's not good enough. And he's got, I would agree, as a receiver room, that's the best receiver room probably in the country. Didn't matter at all here. And Michigan didn't even have their best DB or their best offensive player.
Yeah,
so
that's
there were
crazy.
so many reasons for Ohio State to have won this game, and instead it went this way. So just last item, I'll let you have the floor, was Ryan Day's clock management with 3 minutes to go. Michigan has the ball on their own side of half, half, right? And instead of taking timeouts before the 2-minute warning or 2-minute timeout, whatever they call it, he waits and Michigan busts the back-breaking run, which I think was, they had him
absolutely
at half field,
run.
And he bounces it to the outside for 35 yards. And to me, that was like, okay, Michigan's going to win this game. then he calls a timeout, and then he has too many men on the field and tries to call another timeout, but you can't do back-to-back timeouts. This guy just looked like a total clown in that moment, not even knowing just the simple fundamentals. You just called it. You get paid what, $15 million a year to coach, and you don't know you can't do that. And Joel Klatt was like, oh, he's calling it. Oh, you can't do that. You can't call 2 timeouts back to back. Now, the ensuing penalty was, they were already on the 5-yard line. So it was what, another yard or something. But the point is, that's how disorganized this team was.
Yeah. It's super apparent coming out of a timeout or a clock stoppage and you're not ready to go. Like, that really feels
you can't even get the right number of men on the field.
That's a coaching mistake. Like,
what a sloppy sequence there. First of all, the decision to wait till after 2 minutes to even bother calling timeouts. Then you can't even get the right number. You can't even get your team on the field. Coming out of a timeout, you can't get the team on the field. That is just infuriating. I could see how the fans think he's just not good enough. And then the argument that, so then the argument, I'm still really going here. So then the argument is, well, who would you replace him with?
Right.
And he wins 90% of his game. So then I thought about that, and I'm thinking, you know what? Almost every coach is going to win 10 games with Ohio State. To a man, they have better players. I don't think it matters who coaches Ohio State against Indiana, Purdue, Wisconsin. They're going to win all of those games every year. And it's true. Tressel did it. Day does it. Meyer did it. Whoever the hell else coach there did it. The only games that matter are Michigan, Penn State, and whatever happens in the championship game and in the playoffs. And that's where Ryan Day falters more than he wins. And now I kind of get the point that he's not good enough there, because that team, you can just punch the ticket 10 wins. That's just a 10-win team. You and I can coach them to 10 wins because they're just so much better than everybody else in the Big Ten. And the Big Ten's not a good conference. It's got 2 teams he has to beat. And he typically beats Penn State. And Ryan Day specifically, with all of that talent, and Michigan in a rebuilding year, still lost. And he couldn't figure it out. He couldn't figure out how to beat a limited team, missing their best defensive player and their best offensive player. And who knows at quarterback. And
I think that I agree with you to a certain extent, like about his coaching mistakes and not getting it done and stuff. I think that, winning that many games, and they do a really good job recruiting, which is part of the reason why they have that roster is so good. Like, that means something in coaching.
Oh, I agree.
It's not, so that's part of the reason why if they didn't fire him, that would be the reason, right? But it's just when someone who's that good at putting together that roster and winning 10 games every year.
But putting together an all-world roster at Ohio State's a lot easier than at Ohio. It's not like everywhere Ryan Day goes, a program's just going to turn into a monster.
No, but I've seen really good teams like really fluctuate in terms of like how they, historically really good and like, get really good players and not, and it can go up and down. So but anyway, it was a real debacle. And that was, it's some of those mistakes late are just really glaring under the spotlight. Like you said, when that's four games in a row they've lost to them, which is
the team is in a rebuilding mode with no quarterback. They had no quarterback.
Yeah. And it's just to think that there's some like Ohio State seniors that'll like have never beaten Michigan and stuff
Michigan was handing them the game. That brutal turnover in the end zone.
Oh,
I remember seeing a graphic there. I think it was in the fourth quarter. There was a 9-play stretch where Michigan turned the ball over twice in 9 plays.
Yeah.
And one of them was that awful pick in the end zone.
Right. Like there was that similar to the Notre Dame pick where it's like right at the guy, like at the goal line, and you're like, that had no shot of being completed.
When I saw that, I'm like, okay, Ohio State's going to win if the defense did it. And then they still couldn't do it. I
feel like that defensive player, when they do that in practice and you're like on the goal line, like he never sees the ball ever, like for, 99 snaps. And then all of a sudden it's coming right at him. And he probably would have been like, what the hell is going on right now?
The quarterback, the receiver was open. All he had to do was put it a little bit higher, and he threw it right to the linebacker.
It was crazy.
And he still couldn't win that game. And I think maybe I'm more keyed in on it because of how awful Eberflus blew it on that game without calling the timeout. And Ryan Day just showed he couldn't manage a game either. So, I mean, I know that the argument can go both ways on, yes, he recruits at a really, really high level. He kept that ship going. But man, I can see how the fans there are like, I don't care. We'll take our chances with somebody else.
What do you
like
think?
Lots of guys can recruit at a high level.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think it's I mean, if they make it to the semifinals or championship game, I think that's
I've heard the only acceptable
is championship
outcome here is
championship
game OT loss. Like they're
okay.
win or loss. The only acceptable non-national title ending here, I've heard multiple people say it's got to be championship game against Texas or Georgia to the wire. Either
Close
team could have won. Both teams deserve to win. Close loss. Kind of like the Georgia Ohio State game a few years ago.
Yep.
In the semifinals.
Yeah, really good game.
Either team deserved that game, and both of those teams are going to crush whoever came next. So, which I guess was the TCU loss, right?
Yes.
The TCU game. So whoever won that game was winning the national championship. That was the national championship game that year. And I guess that's a feather in Ryan Day's cap. That game was amazing. And they were a missed field goal away. So
it's crazy that's the expectation for them. But like you said, it's understandable. The last thing about this game. So with my NCAA package here in Canada, and I can only record so many games at one time. And at the noon slot, I had the South Carolina Clemson, really wanted to watch that game. We had the Tennessee Vandy, wanted to watch that game, so I had money on that. So I had to pick one not to record. So I didn't record the Michigan-Ohio State game because I'm like, Ohio State's going to win. It's just a matter of how much. And then I recorded a bunch of the 3:30 games. And so then I was doing radio silence all day so I could watch the recordings at night. And I had the call with Dave. And he's like, did you see any of the games this morning? I'm like, no. I said, the only one I didn't record is Ohio State, Michigan. So I'm like, so you could tell me that one. And that's how I said it. And he was like, Michigan won.
Yeah.
But I was like, what? But luckily the highlights really cover that game real well.
Right,
because it's, doesn't take much to show a 13-10 game. So
no, there was it's more just a series of low lights. All right, well, we really beat that one up, but Ohio State deserved the beating in our worst ever.
Yeah.
So
all right, so the worst thing I saw this weekend was all this flag planting controversy.
Yeah,
crap. That sucks.
I was going to say that too.
Yeah, it's just stupid. I'm either if the other team, you lose the game and the other team plants the flag, then you have to eat it because you lost the game. So. But I'm also cool with just don't do that because, things could be reversed and you don't want to be on the receiving end of it next year and, that kind of a thing. But if that became a tradition where everyone just plants the flag in the other field, I don't give it, I don't really care too much about it.
Coaches agree before the game.
Yeah.
Are we okay with this or not? And then the coaches tell their players, look, the other coach, it's going to smart. But this is how we're going to agree with this. So you get to do it to their stadium, but they get to do it to us.
Right. So it's something, but I mean, it's, I could be talked into that. I'm leaning more toward just don't do it anymore. It's not worth it. And it's definitely not worth it if it ends up in pepper spray because that's what you don't want. It was a really good Michigan-Ohio State game. And at the end, there's people with literally fluid coming out of their eyes and stuff because they're recovering from the pepper spray.
It's really ugly. And you're really putting the security in a really bad position.
Yes.
Because this is bad look for the security, but they probably are feeling like, my God, we can't actually control these guys.
No, that's they don't have a choice.
They're enormous men in suits of armor, and they're really, really emotionally charged
extremely
up.
Strong, extreme. What
are you going to taser them? There's nothing you can do here.
The running back can bench 225 over 30 times. One person can't hold that, you can't restrain
security
people.
Can't control that. I mean, there's 200 of them.
Yeah,
there's 100 on each sideline.
Yes,
and no security guy can handle any of them.
No. So
they immediately have to go to a form of force that's going to look really bad afterwards.
Yes, it does, and it really sucks, and it's we're making a really good case not to do the flag planting thing ever.
Well, if it's accepted, kind of like how the Paul Bunyan's axe, or you go get the trophy and you don't stop them. Yeah, they have every right to, and they come and take it from your sideline. Right? I mean, that's just how it goes, and they don't get into a fight over it. They just understand that they get the trophy today, the oaken bucket and all that stuff.
That a massive 230-pound person that could that it picks up the axe that could kill someone in less than a second and just starts running madly across the field with it is completely acceptable, and you have to let it go. So,
well, but that just shows you it's possible if it's agreed upon and accepted. So I agree with you. I think it's probably better don't bother.
Yeah.
But if you guys want to make an even bigger spectacle out of this, and then the losing team, the at-home losing team has to stare at the flag planted in their stadium, that's pretty good bulletin board and film material for the next year's team. To be like, do you want to see that? Or do you want to be able to put our flag in theirs next year when we're in their stadium? So I could see it going both ways, but either way, they got to get control over this. Good for Napier for reprimanding his team.
Yes.
And he's going to do something behind closed doors, but he also publicly came out and said this is unacceptable, embarrassing, and there will be consequences.
Yeah, and it was because that's another thing. Like if you're leading a team and you've established that we're not going to do that, then he's had the absolute right reaction to that.
Also, they did it right after seeing what happened at Michigan or at Ohio State. God, exactly. Guys, get it together.
Yeah. You don't want the Florida State troopers coming out there to try and get everything under control.
Anyways, you're right. That was pretty bad. That was my other thing. I'm glad you covered it. I forgot to say that spoiled the ending of a kind of a crazy upset, and then it just turned into this ugly scene, which is not good.
No.
All right, so Flowers.
Yep.
All right, well, Kyle McCord, 26 36,
Kyle McCord.
83 TDs, and just the vindication of Kyle McCord. That this was just an outstanding week for him, and just by the end of the season, the way the Ohio State game went, I think McCord should feel great about himself, and holy smokes, the coaching staff at Syracuse. Like he said earlier in the season, thank you very much for letting him go.
Yeah. Well, and that was because when it happened, everyone was like, can't believe they're getting rid of it. And of all the places, Syracuse, like it's like he was getting banished somewhere. But hats off to them, because there was a good team. He's played well with I hope they give him a whole rack of ribs at Dinosaur Barbecue. Shout out Dinosaur Barbecue. Really good barbecue place in Syracuse. So
all right,
anyway,
what do you got?
Flowers for Haynes King. We mentioned it earlier, 300 yards passing and 110 yards running. Like that would, they lost 8 overtime, but great game. And at Georgia, and they were taking it to him, and he was the reason why. So good job on him.
All right, Flowers for LaNorris Sellers.
Yes.
Not necessarily his entire stat line, but taking that game over on the last drive and that game-winning scramble. First of all, good for Cade Klubnik. He had all the touchdowns.
He looked like they couldn't stop him running either.
It was. I think he recognized somewhere in the middle of this game, we can't score on this defense. I got to literally do what I can, and he did with his legs. And then Sellers was doing the same thing. He's like, oh yeah, these defenses both showed up to play, and when it mattered the most, Sellers made it happen. And I thought, oh my God, because we picked them to win this game.
Yep.
But man, as the game was going on, I'm like, holy smokes, Clemson defense showed up here. This might not work. And then that final drive and the final touchdown run, it was like, oh, that's the best player on the field.
6'3", 240 freshman.
Yeah. In that moment, it was like, that's the best player on the field. This is going to be a Heisman candidate in the next 3 years. And that was, God,
166 yards rushing.
This has been the season that could have been. They should be in the playoffs.
Yeah, they've won 5 in a row or whatever now.
They should have beat LSU, and they should have beat Bama. All right, what else you got?
No, hats off to them. That was great. You go to the next one.
Shadur Sanders, 34-40 for 41, 348, 438 yards, 5 TDs.
Yeah.
And then I'll dovetail that off to Travis Hunter.
Yep.
10 receptions, 116 yards, 3 TDs, and he got a pick. So, he's right there. Him and Genty. Genty had 37 carries, 226 yards, a TD, something over 2,000 yards for the season. I hope it's just between the two of them, and we'll finally see a non-QB win the Heisman. So good for both of them. Flowers for both of them.
Yeah, and those were on my list too. And the last one that I had was Jaden Mavia from USC. Like I think that He looks really good. He's a sophomore. He hasn't been starting the whole season. He looks like
you got to give it the little bit. There's some rotten leaves on that flower for the 2 picks.
Yeah, the picks are horrendous, but like he's a sophomore, threw for 360 yards, 3 TDs. Those picks were terrible, but like he's a sophomore. They're going to be,
He'll learn.
hadn't played all season. Like it's more lately, and so that they're going to be excited with him moving forward.
Yep.
So. Yeah.
And then my last one's Tyler Warren for getting the Big Ten reception record for tight ends. And that's legit. The Big Ten's produced a lot of good tight ends.
That's all the tight ends. So
getting to the top of that mountain's a big deal. He's going to be fun to watch in the pros. Speaking of tight ends in the pros, Brock Bowers is got the third or fourth most receptions in the NFL.
Oh, really?
Not for tight ends.
Oh, really?
But he's only behind Jordan Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and that's it. Maybe something like that.
Oh, man.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy like that what he's doing in the NFL. So I don't know if Tyler Warren's going to be quite like that, but just good for Tyler Warren, and I think he'll be great in the NFL.
Bowers from Napa, California.
Oh, all right. You got anything else?
No. The UNLV quarterback. I really, they took care of business against Nevada. I still love the guy's story. It's the Williams, right? There was the, that took over for the other guy, and all he does is keep winning, and they're in their Mountain West championship game. So flowers to that guy.
Yep. All right. Well, that was a pretty good rivalry week, and we'll see how that compares with the NFL. I don't think the NFL is going to keep up with that. I can think we can already call it.
Fantastic week of college football.
Yeah. There's no way that nothing the NFL can produce is going to be that good.
No, there's some family events that wouldn't compare to the rivalry week that I just experienced.
All right, so but with that said, you got to come back to the channel and watch our review of the NFL tomorrow. All right, we'll catch you later.